it going, Joe?
Good. Nice to meet you. How are you today?
Nice to meet you too. I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. It's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite, and I love your background.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
It's
I'm a
incredible.
I'm a visual artist, so it's one of my paintings.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. I would love to check out your art.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah. I'll send you over my link for sure. Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you. And I want to begin our conversation before we get into your latest album and your life and music. We're looking at the calendar. It's the 4-year anniversary of the pandemic. As an artist, how did you survive that time period and how did it change you?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Yeah, so we had our son January of 2020. And so
Wow.
we were kind of in the thick of having a 1.5-year-old and a newborn.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it was really good for our family during the time as far as the seclusion. But in an artistic and creative way, I will say for me, I need things to change a lot. And so I do remember during that time being a little bit stuck, walking around the same neighborhood every single day, multiple times a day. So I started actually doing writing sessions with friends around the country, but also around the world too. So started collaborating with other creatives in other countries, writing songs, writing poetry, and just connecting in that virtual space. And also, I'm a vocal coach too, so I started teaching my lessons online too. And honestly, 4 years later, most of my lessons are taught online still.
Wow.
You know, so I think that's kind of some of the things that really kind of they kept things fresh for me during the time. And I really feel like it's kind of shifted our rhythms of how we live today as well.
So talk to me about your latest album and how influenced was it by living through this time period? What was kind of the artistic vision?
It was interesting. I've been singing jazz for over 20 years and singing pop and rock and gospel kind of all over the place. So this particular album was more birthed after that. So coming out of the pandemic, I moved to Houston, Texas. I one of the things that I do is I work with the NFL and I do music for the NFL in a capacity of I lead chapel services and I do music for them and organize gatherings. And so the team that I work with now is here in Houston, and they asked us to move out here. And so when I moved to Houston, I started this journey of discovering what does the city have to offer, where are the artists in the city. Those are the things that are important to me. Connecting and seeing what the heartbeat of art was in Houston. And I connected, one of the first musicians that I connected with was the guitarist on the album. His name is Greg Petito. And he is a phenomenal guitarist. Immediately when I heard him play, he just was incredibly captivating. And as you listen to the album, you'll hear his solos just super virtuosic playing, but he plays across a myriad of styles, you know. So from jazz, rock, classical, you'll hear all the influences in his playing. So I was fortunate enough to find him, and we started collaborating, especially at this club called Sambuca here in Houston. And every single time that I would sing with him, he had a different group of musicians that were there. So you know, for musicians, especially jazz musicians, a lot of times you're meeting for the first time on the stage
Mhm.
right before downbeat, you know, and that was I constantly find myself in that situation. Right? I meet in the downbeat, and then we have this organic experience together where we're playing standards or pop songs and we're improvising and we're doing all these things, and at the end of the night, now you've become friends, now you've become community. And I think that's something that's beautiful in my jazz experience. All around the world, it's been the same thing. And here in Houston, that's kind of been my way to meet other creatives and discover some of the beauty here.
So what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this album?
I think one of the big things for me is being a jazz singer, jazz artist, but also jazz listener. I really enjoy jazz. I know that today sometimes it's, you know, sometimes people need on ramps to that particular genre.
Yeah.
But I also am a big fan of modern music and pop music and all of that too. And so when you listen, we put a couple of pop songs on this record as well, but they're played in a jazz style, so it kind of gives a fresh and new approach to that too. So a lot of what we cultivate in our experiences is taking a listener who hasn't really listened to jazz and doesn't really know how to what is this improvisation thing that's happening on the stage? Like, are they just making things up? Like, is there science behind it? Like, what's going on? Is there communication that's happening? And so they'll hear a song that they might recognize, and then they'll hear how we interpret it in a new experience that they're experiencing in the room there. And so I think one of the things in this album is to help bridge that gap. I have a lot of people that have only experienced me in the jazz circles, and a lot of people have only experienced me in the pop music and modern music circles. And so to be able to merge those experiences and host them in that experience is a goal for me.
So you've had quite a path you've kind of touched on a little bit. Take me back to where you were born and raised and how you got into the music. How did music become your career and who you are today?
Yeah. So I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. And in Charleston, it's rich in the arts culture. My mother was a singer. She's a pianist and an organist. And my stepfather was also a music director, singer, producer, all of that too. So I grew up in a home that was filled with music. I grew up going to rehearsals, hearing them teach singers, hearing them teach harmonies. Our first recording studio was built in our living room. So, late at night when I have school the next morning, they're still recording at 3 in the morning. That was back during that time, when you had choirs and groups and, all these incredible vocalists and soloists. And so that's what I grew up around. And then I ended up being accepted to a performing arts school when I was in sixth grade, the Charleston School of the Arts. And there I studied for 7 years, performance. And I would say at that school is where I was exposed to a lot of classical music, a lot of jazz music, but also a lot of oldies as well. We would play Earth, Wind, and Fire. We would play like Take Six. We'd play New York Voices. I was in a jazz vocal group there. I also was in the jazz band there. Like just tons of exposure. And so it it was a very normal experience for us to just create music. I wouldn't say that it translated as a career for me. It just translated as who I was. A big part of who I was, and how I expressed myself was through music. So in school and then out school was mainly involved in church with my family there. Um, and yeah, after that, I went on to get my bachelor's in performance and my minor in jazz, and then a master's in conducting after that. So most of it has turned out to being involved in the jazz circles after graduation, kind of helping organize things for other artists as well, which I really love. And just yeah, constantly writing and sharing those experiences over the years. Yeah.
So what was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
Man, that's a great question. Let me think about
Mm.
that. Okay, so I think it was in the eighth grade, I want to say. I was a part of a club called the Intermezzo Club. And they would take a group of students from the middle school to a we had a performance hall called the Gilliard Auditorium in Charleston. And so the Intermezzo Club got season tickets to all the performances. And so we saw the opera, we saw the ballet, we saw all these things. But the reason why I signed up for it is because the finale was a Wynton Marsalis show. And I think it was it his I think it was Wynton and Yo-Yo Ma maybe. It might have been their duet show. But that's why I signed up for it.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
absolutely obsessed with Wynton Marsalis, especially as he merged a classical and a jazz career um, as well. That was just fascinating to me, and it also resonated to me since I was really deeply involved in multiple genres of music.
Yeah.
And I got to meet him during that time as well, and I got absolutely starstruck. I don't get starstruck, but I got starstruck with him.
I'm reading a book about Miles Davis. It's about the construction of Kind of Blue. And
Yeah.
they're really getting into the history of Miles. And I never knew this for as long as I've been involved with jazz. I've had my show since 2011. I've been relatively on top of it this whole time. And for the first time ever, I heard about Wynton actually went on stage when Miles was playing at a festival, uninvited, and it turned into kind of a thing. And it became kind of this row. Did you know about that?
I think I heard that. I think I heard that
I was
actually.
like, wow, because it was almost like he was getting bet. He was getting
Mm,
hedged on doing that. He was on the way there, and I just
yeah,
I never knew about it, but it's interesting because those two kind of had different philosophies, and there was kind of a
right,
revolving dialogue. So,
for
but
sure.
I've always been like kind of dumbfounded as to the criticism that both Winton and the Marsalis dynasty gets because they've done so much good. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of what they talk about them being rooted in tradition, but they're from New Orleans. Like, how can you escape that? Like,
Right.
you're going to go to the etymology of the art form, and then you're going
Yep.
to add on top of that. So
Right.
it's wild.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is. It is wild. I don't think that you can discredit any of their contribution to art
right.
or jazz music in general, even if you have styles or rooted or roots in your culture. You know,
Yep.
like it's like me. Like I I might sing an opera song, but I'm still going to sound like Robbie,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And so, and what does Robbie sound like? It's a collection of the roots of where I grew up, you know. So you're gonna hear some gospel elements in what I sing. You're gonna hear some jazz and soul elements in what I sing, but that's a part of me. And
Yep.
so yeah. And then I think like the Marsalis family in general, I feel like they execute at such a high level as well that it's just it's a gift to be able to behold. But that's a lot of musicians, right? That's
Yep.
a ton of musicians. But that family
Yeah.
particularly because they get so much being in the spotlight, they've been such a gift for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. So let me ask you this. What do you like the best about being a professional musician? There's all these aspects that go into it, from live shows to recording to education. But what do you look
Yeah.
forward to the most every day?
I grew up kind of a shy kid. You know, I was always into music. I had the natural facility for music, but as far as being a lead singer or a lead soloist, like that was not necessarily my personality. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge. But I will say in this season of my life, as I step out more and um, be able to offer this gift of music and art, and you know, helping people remember these songs that were so significant to them, it feels like a hosting experience. And you know, as I get older, I see, you know, people, they want these experiences. And to be able to not only give them a performance that will give them rest and peace for the day in this crazy rhythm and all the things that are happening in this world and you know the inundation of you know things that are happening around the world, to give us a moment of pause and to be able to host that experience means a lot to me. I love to facilitate that. I also just love I love, you know, all these old artists. You know, I love music and just being able to create in the moment. I think there's a satisfaction that comes when you're able to express and collaborate. And, you know, to me, when I get to sing with other musicians, I I feel my voice resonating with their instrument, you know, so it doesn't feel separated. It feels very connected for me.
Yeah.
So it feels like I'm building relationships with people on the stage, but I'm also able to bring people into that experience from off the stage too. So I think that's probably what I like the most.
So we'd mentioned Winton, and I'm sure you've played around a lot of esteemed players and veterans in your life. What have you accumulated from them players that you in turn try to teach to the younger players about being a musician?
Yeah. I would say, okay, so when I was younger and I was definitely a lot more competitive in my music, just trying to work my way up. When you were saying that question, like one thing that flashed back to me, like I got to sing with Wycliffe Gordon a few times, with Fred Wesley a few times, and those two are so fun to me. They're extremely talented. They have such characteristic solo capabilities and all of that. But I just remember being in a big band with them, um, and then you know the band director is like, "All right, Wycliffe, take over," you know. and Wycliffe will go up and he'll just start singing something, and then he'll look to one section and say, "All right, trumpets, play this. Trombones, play this. Saxes, play this." And like he'll just like create this moment, you know. And same thing, Fred Wesley will do the same thing. They'll sing this song. I don't know if they made it up. I don't know if it was already written, whatever. But it's like so fresh in the moment. And I think when at that point I was a lot younger, and just watching that coming out of a very like disciplined regimen, you need to be practicing 6 to 8 hours a day kind of environment, to being in the moment, watching them create.
Yeah.
It merged the two concepts of master craftsmanship and having fun in the art. And I think that is kind of sometimes a little bit hard to reconcile, because some people just want to have fun in the art, and that's fine if that's the journey. And some people are just too serious. That was me. And
Yeah.
so, and so like being able to merge those two of like being serious and then also remembering, all right, now it's time for the performance, which means be in the moment and really enjoy the experience in the moment. I think that was one of the biggest gifts for me,
Yeah.
that I started to see, because when you're young, you're just trying to figure it out. You're like, I want to sound like you. I want to do what you do. I want to do that. And then, but most of those guys are just like, just want you to be you. Like we just want you to be you.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you could go see a dream jazz show, get into a time machine and go anywhere and see any show, where are you going?
Ella Fitzgerald all day.
Okay.
All day. Um, I've been obsessed with Ella Fitzgerald since I was in high school. So that was over 20 years ago now. Um, what she did was so innovative, but also thinking through the lens of a vocalist, like her tone of voice and how she would manipulate that, her improvisatory skills, like her life story as well. Like all of that was so captivating for me. And I also love big band as well. And so that was a big thing. She was one of my earliest influences. As you know, I studied instruments growing up too, and so I think she's kind of like the more instrumentalist kind of vocalist. And then I listened to one of my buddies. He was a trombone player. He played Kurt Elling for me when I was in high school. We were in a jazz vocal group, and I heard Kurt Elling live in Chicago album, which this album kind of references that, which is
Yeah.
why it was Live at Sambuca, because
Yeah.
that was I credit that album as the album that made me a jazz vocalist.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, and I just was like, I was just mesmerized, and I was just silent the whole time listening to this record. And I was like, I didn't know that you could do this,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he was definitely transformative for me over those few years after that. And I actually didn't start singing jazz as a soloist until I was a junior in college.
Okay.
I had a jazz teacher there, and I walked in, and his name is Dr. John Valerio. He teaches in Columbia, South Carolina. And I walked in and I said, I always wanted to sing jazz. I just don't know if I have the voice for that.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, sing me something. And I sang My Foolish Heart, Kurt Elling's version of it. And he was like, you should definitely be singing jazz. And I was like, really? And then he gave me the hardest piece to sing, which was Twisted by Annie Ross,
Yeah.
Lambert Sandrickson Ross.
Yeah.
It's a jazz vocalese, and I worked it up in like a week. And that's how vocalese kind of became a thing for me. Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, and fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's a great question. Wow. So I first and foremost, I have my beautiful family that I care about and work so hard to make sure that they have a good, safe reality and they feel loved and safe. I have my faith, um, and I spend a lot of investment in that. And then also as an extension of my life, I'm an artist, and so I really feel like in art, it's just the way that I view life. Really, it's not, you know. Like singing is a medium for me. My instruments are a medium for me, but my creativity kind of it boils down and it kind of filters itself into other mediums as well. I do fashion. I organize events, which to me is a very creative thing too.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that I guess I view myself as a connector, as an empath. I really have sometimes a too much controlling desire for people to have a good time and to feel loved and valued and safe. That's going to that's going to boil down into everything that I do. But yeah, I try to, because of the gift of art that I've been given, I try to perform at a high quality as much as possible, and focus on that as, giving honor to the art, to the craft that's been placed in my hands, but also the people that are listening and the people who are working at it. I just think it's very important. So yeah, I think that,
Yeah,
uh,
that's a
yeah.
great answer. So let me ask you this. If anyone wants to pick up the latest album, learn about live shows, anything in your world, where can they go? How can they do it?
Yeah, so the album Robbie Madison Live at Sambuca is going to be available on all streaming platforms on March 22nd. My website is robbiemadison.com, and that's ROBBIE MADISON 1D. And I'll have everything posted on there. All my handles on everything is Robbie Madison Music. And the reason why I'm very particular about that is I have a very close friend who has the same name and same website as me, spells
Okay.
his name with two D's, and he's a famous motorcyclist. He's like, yeah, he's a Guinness World Record holder, multiple records, and so we joke about that a lot. But yeah, if you go on my website or any of my handles, follow me on Instagram. I post on there a lot, Robbie Madison Music,
Okay.
and we'll be sharing it, and I hope that you can share it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly will. Robbie, this has been wonderful. You have such a wonderful spirit. Thank you for sharing your story, your time. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate
Yeah,
your time. Great to
absolutely.
meet you.
You bet.